Interesting. Talking about, you did speak of millennials and the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys and everything. So do you see a divide between the millennial workforce and the pre-millennial workforce in the way they approach tasks, in the way they approach going about their work on a daily basis?
I think the difference, if at all there is their approach towards life. Like how does one approach, how does a 22-year-old, 23-year-old approach life versus how does a 35-year-old approach life? And I think the fundamental of difference lies there. Like how would one view work-life balance? Or how, I sometimes look at these 20-year-olds and think that, how did I look at work-life balance back then? Like, could I think of, taking off after 6 months of working and I don't really care what happens to my job. I'm going to go travel for 6 months and come back and figure out where life takes me. I think that's amazing.
So that is the inherent mindset.
Yes. So I guess that's because they approach life differently. They approach work and everything around it differently as well. But at the same time, there's huge commitments that they have. So when they work, they're like so committed and they have an opinion and they are not shy of expressing their opinion, which I think is great.
Interesting. Now, the Generation Y is often accused of being an entitled lot. What's your experience or opinion about that?
It's quite an interesting question. Actually, when I was going through it, I was thinking about it, what's the right answer for this? But tell me, I think they've earned to be entitled in a lot of ways. They're born in, and I'm talking about India. They're born in an India where the previous generation worked enough to keep life at a certain comfort. And I'm talking largely about cities. Rural India is very different. And I'm assuming when you're asking about the entitlement question, you're talking about the workforce in cities. So when they grow up in that manner, I don't think they really know that, they really think that, I'm entitled, because that's their way of life. And then for people to make a judgment saying that, okay, these people come with a sense of entitlement, I think it's unfair to them.
Okay, so the flip side to that is you're seeing more and more innovation and disruption in the form of startups from this Generation Y. What's your take on that?
You said that. You said it. I wouldn't say it's a flip side. I think it's a natural progression. It's like, it is the Maslow's need hierarchy. Right. So like if you're not having to think about the basics, it could be probably, it's nice that people are thinking of different new ideas, innovations, and they're bringing so many new concepts to life, which I think is great. It's not a flip side. I would say it's an extension of that.
I really like the way that you put that these guys are not really entitled, but they are, they've grown in that atmosphere, and that's why they seem to be entitled, but they actually are not.
Yeah, I think others make them, others use this word that they are entitled. It's the way of life for them. And I think, I don't know if I should say this, but it's like the generation gap that people talk about.
It's the whole perception, the way these guys are looked at is...
Yeah, if we put our hands on our heart, then we think, didn't we hear these things when we were in our 20s, saying, you don't have to think much about things. You haven't seen the poor India, you haven't seen poverty, you haven't seen people suffering. So you don't really know what real life is, and still you're saying that, you have problems.
Interesting. Now, in your interaction with the students now, do you come across a lot of students wanting to pursue a career in HR, or the function doesn't appeal that much to this generation?
While I don't have any statistics to back, but I recently, I think earlier this year or maybe later part of last year, I was addressing a group of students in school, and I think there were about 2,000 odd students in that auditorium. And so when I asked them what, there was a question like, how many of them wanted to be professionals versus how many of them wanted to be, do something of, else. About 50% people said they would be professionals. And then it's okay, how many of you would want to become HR? Okay. Trust me, There was not a single hand raised.
That's astonishing.
But that was in school, and I think there were students from 9th till the 12th. I don't know whether they knew what really HR meant, but not even. And you know what astonished me more is there wasn't much of curiosity to know what it is.
I think they get to know only about it in a much later.
I guess once, yeah. But I don't know. Actually, it'll be an interesting thing to know. Are people as interested to do HR? But it's so interesting, and now it is more interesting, I would say, because of the diversity in workforce that we were just talking about.
I think we've been hammered while we were growing up that doctor banna hai, engineer banna hai, ya kuch banna hai. I mean, that has been the most hammering, but never like bade hoke HR banna hai. That is never.
Do you think anybody aspires कि मुझे बड़े होके HR बनना है?
Really?
I haven't come across in so many years of my career. I haven't really come across as somebody who said, you know, I grew up to become an HR person.
True.
But having said that, I'm sure in the management colleges there is still an HR discipline, and there are so many students who are pursuing it. So I'm sure there is enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sensitization now compared to earlier. True.
Otherwise, what's going to happen to the profession?
Coming to the technology part. So, how do you think has technology impacted HR as a function?
Lots of analytics, insights, machine learning. I think the whole complexion of learning and development, right from concept to delivery, that whole value chain, I think is changing tremendously with the advent of technology. People are looking at the audience differently because the audience is wanting to learn differently, and hence that in some form forces the methodology and the methods of delivery, you know, changes to be brought in those methods of delivery. So I think the whole chain is changing, and for good. It's interesting.
Right. I think even the approach is more sensitive to a person's learnings or.
Yes, the other day we were a few of us were talking, and people said that, you know, we are launching something called customized learning. So let people learn what they want to learn. So there is a bouquet that is available, and you can pick and choose. And I think that's wonderful to receive as an employee. Okay, this is what I would like to learn, and the organization is creating opportunities for me to learn exactly that. It will be interesting to see how they link it back to how they're contributing to the organization after having learned what they wanted to learn. It will be interesting to see how institutionalized learning and customized learning, where do they meet? Which point do they meet?
That is a hazy picture right now.
It's evolving. I think it's an evolving picture.
So like you said, AI, machine learning bots, they are making a lot of difference. Now, while digital and social platforms are being used by marketing teams to push their brand and products, do you think HR can use these platforms to create a positive impact, and how?
I'm sure, yeah. Like, you know, if there are success stories in the organization, which people would like to know, I think social media is a fantastic platform to put up those success stories there. Or even if there's a deliberation that is happening and you need perspectives from larger audience, I think one can really use social media to get that. I think it depends on how one wants to use social media. What is the objective of being there and wanting to use? What is it that I want out of it as HR? But I think it's a fantastic platform to utilize or use for creating larger employer branding, employer recall. Like even hiring, I mean, LinkedIn is so effective.
Absolutely.
From hiring, and one couldn't have imagined this about a decade and a half ago, right? Like people would be hiring real key positions through LinkedIn.